The morning light filtered through the crystalline dome of New Arcturus Station, casting rainbow patterns across Dr. Lyra Thin's iridescent scales as she prepared for work. The Centaurian scientist hummed an old Earth tune her husband had taught her, her crystalline voice adding an otherworldly quality to the melody. Marcus Chen watched from their kitchen, a smile playing across his face as he packed her lunch with the same precision he once used to prepare mission gear. "Your presentations are color-coded again," Lyra noted, her head frills rippling with amusement as she observed the perfectly arranged containers. Once a Special Forces operator, always a Special Forces operator. Marcus shrugged, his weathered features softening. "Old habits die hard. Besides, your species metabolizes proteins differently throughout the day. The blue container is for morning, red for afternoon." Their apartment, located in the station's prestigious research district, represented the perfect blend of their two cultures. Centaurian crystal sculptures caught the light next to Marcus's collection of ancient Earth books. The environmental controls maintained a careful balance between the humid warmth Lyra's species preferred and the cooler temperatures humans found comfortable. "The new research wing opens today," Lyra said, her scales shifting to an excited blue-green. "We're finally getting the quantum sequencer I've been requesting for my xenobiology studies." Her three-fingered hand intertwined with Marcus's 5 fingers, a gesture that had become natural over their 3 years of marriage. Marcus squeezed her hand gently. "Just remember what I taught you about situational awareness. New equipment means new personnel, and not everyone appreciates our kind of partnership." Lyra's scales flickered briefly to a concerned purple before settling back to their usual pearlescent sheen. "The station's gotten much better about interspecies relationships. Besides, I have the most capable human on New Arcturus watching my back." The morning commute through the station's sprawling corridors showcased the diversity that made New Arcturus famous. Methane-breathing Krell floated in their containment suits past silicon-based lithoids, while compact robotic shells housed the digital consciousness of the network collective. Humans, adaptable as ever, walked comfortably among them all. At the entrance to the Xenobiology Research Center, Marcus performed his usual subtle security scan. Another habit from his previous life. "Dinner at Stellar Fusion tonight. They just got a new chef who supposedly knows how to make both Earth sushi and Centaurian crystal fish." "It's a date," Lyra agreed, her scales shimmering with joy. They shared a brief touch of foreheads, the traditional Centaurian farewell gesture, before she disappeared into the research facility. The new wing buzzed with activity as scientists from a dozen species calibrated equipment and established workstations. Lyra was adjusting the settings on her quantum sequencer when a shadow fell across her console. She looked up to find herself facing an imposing figure in a crisp uniform adorned with unfamiliar insignia. "Officer Zexkar, Regulatory Compliance Division," the uniformed Fraxian announced, his metallic exoskeleton gleaming under the laboratory lights. "I'm conducting standard inspections of all new facilities." His secondary eyes focused on her wedding band, while his primary set remained fixed on her face. "Of course, officer," Lyra replied professionally, noting how his posture had stiffened upon seeing her ring. "All our permits and certifications are in order." The inspection proceeded with mechanical precision until Zexkar reached her personal workstation. His upper appendages twitched as he examined the holo image of her wedding day. Lyra in traditional Centaurian ceremonial scales, Marcus in his formal Earth attire. "Fascinating choice of partnership," Zexkar commented, his translator struggling to maintain neutral tones. "I wasn't aware humans were considered suitable mates by any advanced species." Before Lyra could respond, another scientist called for the officer's attention. As Zexkar moved away, Lyra noticed her scales had shifted to a deep indigo, her species' instinctive response to perceived threat. She made a mental note to tell Marcus about the encounter, then forced herself to focus on her work. After all, she had dealt with prejudice before. This was just another minor inconvenience in an otherwise perfect life. She had no way of knowing that this seemingly routine inspection would shatter the peaceful existence she and Marcus had built, or that it would eventually demonstrate to the entire station why humans had earned their reputation as the most formidable protectors in the known galaxy. 3 weeks after Officer Zexkar's inspection, Lyra noticed the first signs that something was wrong. Her quantum sequencer's results showed inexplicable errors, corrupting weeks of careful research. As she reviewed the data logs, her scales shifted to a troubled gray. Dr. Thin. The lab's artificial intelligence chimed. I've detected an anomaly in the environmental controls again. Temperature fluctuations exceed normal parameters by 12%. Lyra frowned, her head frills twitching with concern. This marked the 5th malfunction this week. She reached for her communication device, then hesitated. Marcus had taught her to trust her instincts, and something about these accidents felt orchestrated. Instead of calling maintenance, she opened a secure channel to her husband. The environmental controls are acting up again, she said casually, using their prearranged code for potential security concerns. Marcus's response was immediate. I'll bring you lunch today. That new place you mentioned sounds interesting. His tone was light, but Lyra knew he understood the warning. When Marcus arrived, he carried not only their meal, but also a small device disguised as a personal air purifier. As they ate in her office, he subtly activated it, creating a field that would detect any surveillance equipment. Tell me about these malfunctions, he said quietly, his eyes scanning the room with practiced ease. Years of Special Forces training had taught him that coincidences rarely existed in sufficient quantities. Lyra pulled up her research logs on a secure tablet. The quantum sequencer gave impossible readings, suggesting someone tampered with either the calibration or the base programming. The environmental controls swing between extremes, affecting sensitive experiments. And yesterday, she hesitated, her scales flickering to a nervous purple. Yesterday, Marcus prompted, his hand instinctively moving closer to hers. I found this in my private research files. She showed him a data fragment containing ancient Vraxian script. It translates to the pure remain, the tainted fall. Marcus's expression hardened. He recognized psychological warfare when he saw it. Have you reported any of this? To Dr. Xin, my department head. She suggested I was overworked and recommended taking time off. Lyra's scales rippled with frustration. The station security said they'd look into it, but without proof of tampering. They won't risk diplomatic incidents on hunches, Marcus finished. He pulled out his own tablet, making several rapid calculations. The timing of these malfunctions isn't random. They occur most frequently when you're working on your interspecies medical compatibility research. A crash from the outer lab interrupted their discussion. They'd rushed out to find Lyra's backup data crystals shattered on the floor, their contents irretrievable. The security cameras had experienced a routine maintenance cycle during the incident. Later that evening, as they walked home through the station's quieter corridors, Marcus outlined his plan. I'm installing additional security measures in the lab and our apartment. Not standard station equipment, some specialized tools from my previous work. You think Officer Zexkar is behind this? Lyra asked, her voice barely a whisper. He has the access and the motivation. But proving it. Marcus paused, considering their options. We need to be smart about this. The Vraxians have significant influence on the station's council. They rounded a corner to find their apartment door slightly ajar. Marcus immediately pushed Lyra behind him, his body tensing as he approached. Inside, nothing was obviously disturbed, but Lyra's scales instantly detected an unfamiliar chemical trace in the air. On their bedroom wall, barely visible under normal light, but glowing faintly to Centaurian vision, someone had painted another Vraxian phrase. Evolution demands separation. Marcus took a sample for analysis, while Lyra contacted station security, though they both knew official channels would yield little help. As they cleaned the wall, Lyra noticed something in her husband's expression, a familiar look she'd seen in old videos of his military days. "You're planning something," she said, her head frills detecting the subtle changes in his body temperature that humans called adrenaline. "Yes," Marcus replied, his voice carrying the quiet certainty that had first attracted her to him. "It's time to remind certain people why humans gained a reputation for being the most dangerous species in the galaxy when protecting their loved ones." Marcus transformed their apartment's spare room into a command center within 2 days. Holographic displays showed security feeds from carefully hidden cameras, while a quantum-encrypted computer system monitored various sensors throughout the research wing. Lyra watched as her husband worked, his movements precise and methodical. "The basic defensive techniques I'm going to teach you," Marcus explained, clearing a space in the center of the room. "Focus on using your natural advantages. Centaurian reflexes are faster than most species, and your ability to read thermal patterns gives you an edge." Lyra's scales shifted to an attentive blue-green as she mimicked his stance. "I never thought I'd need combat training. My parents warned me that life with a human would be unpredictable." Her head frills rippled with affection. Though this wasn't quite what they meant. "Unpredictable is our specialty." Marcus smiled, then became serious. "The first rule of human tactical thinking. Turn your opponent's assumptions into weaknesses. Everyone underestimates interspecies couples. We'll use that." Their training session was interrupted by an alert from Marcus's security system. In the lab, someone had attempted to access Lyra's private research terminal. The intrusion failed, thanks to Marcus's upgraded security, but the attempt originated from a terminal with administrative privileges. "They're getting bolder," Lyra observed, her scales darkening with concern. She pulled up her research logs on a secure tablet. "Look at this pattern. Every intrusion attempt coincides with my work on cross-species medical compatibility. Specifically, the research that could help other human-alien couples." Marcus nodded, making connections. "They're not just targeting us. We're a test case for something bigger." He pulled up station records on his secure system. In the past month, 3 other interspecies research projects have reported equipment malfunctions or data corruption. A soft chime interrupted them. Someone at their door. The security scanner showed Officer Zexkar, his metallic exoskeleton gleaming under the corridor lights. "Dr. Kithin," he called through the intercom. "A routine follow-up inspection is required for your laboratory certification." Marcus silently signaled Lyra, who activated a series of hidden recordings devices. They had prepared for this. "Of course, officer," Lyra responded, opening the door. Her scales maintained a carefully neutral shade as Zexkar entered. The Vraxian's secondary eyes scanned the apartment while his primary set remained fixed on Lyra. "Your research has encountered several technical difficulties lately. Most unfortunate." "Yes, though thankfully no critical data was lost," Lyra replied smoothly. "My husband's experience with security systems proved quite valuable." Zexkar's exoskeleton plates shifted slightly, a sign of agitation that would have been imperceptible to most, but Lyra's thermal vision caught the heat signature change. "Ah yes, your human partner. His previous military service must provide interesting dinner conversation." Among other benefits, Lyra agreed pleasantly. "He's teaching me several fascinating human security protocols." The threat was subtle but clear. They were not defenseless. Zexkar's appendages twitched, and his translator struggled to maintain neutral tones. "Be careful, Doctor. Some protocols might clash with station regulations. It would be regrettable if your research privileges were revoked." After Zexkar left, Marcus emerged from the secure room, where he'd been monitoring the conversation. "He's planning something bigger." That wasn't just a threat. It was a warning shot. Lyra nodded, her scales now showing streaks of determined silver. "He didn't notice the new security measures, or the fact that I was recording his thermal signature patterns." She pulled up a detailed scan. "Vraxians can't fully control their heat emissions when agitated. His patterns showed spikes of aggression every time human adaptation was mentioned." Marcus's expression turned grim. "We need to accelerate our preparations. The next attack won't be subtle." He paused. Studying the data. How do you feel about attending the Interstellar Science Summit next week? The one I declined last month. Why? Because, Marcus explained, a familiar tactical glint in his eyes. Sometimes the best defense is letting your opponent think they've found the perfect opportunity to attack. The Interstellar Science Summit transformed the station's Grand Conference Center into a showcase of technological wonders. Holographic displays demonstrated breakthrough research, while scientists from dozens of species shared their discoveries. Lyra stood at her presentation podium, her scales shimmering with professional confidence as she prepared to share her findings on interspecies medical compatibility. "Your human isn't attending," a colleague asked, noticing Marcus's absence. "I heard he never misses your presentations." "Emergency consultation off station," Lyra explained, her practiced response hiding the truth. In reality, Marcus was much closer than anyone suspected. The conference hall's lighting dimmed as Lyra began her presentation. Recent breakthroughs in quantum cellular analysis have revealed fascinating adaptability in human genetic structures, she explained, bringing up detailed holographic models. This research suggests possibilities for revolutionary medical treatments benefiting all species. In the environmental control room above the conference hall, Marcus watched through specialized optical gear. His military training had taught him to recognize the signs of an impending attack, and every instinct warned him one was coming. He noted 3 maintenance workers who moved with too much precision, their uniforms slightly off-standard. Lyra continued her presentation, her scales maintaining their professional sheen despite the tension she felt. The human capacity for genetic adaptation presents unique opportunities for. The lights went out. Emergency illumination kicked in immediately, but it flickered and died, exactly as Marcus had predicted it would. In the momentary darkness, he detected movement through his tactical visor. The false maintenance workers were converging on Lyra's position. But Marcus had planned for this. When the backup emergency lights activated, the one station security didn't know Marcus had installed. They revealed an empty podium. Lyra had already moved, following the evasion pattern they'd practiced, her natural Centaurian night vision guiding her. "Security breach in Science Summit Hall B," the station's AI announced, its voice oddly distorted. "Please remain calm," and the announcement cut off abruptly. Officer Zexkar's voice replaced it. "Dr. Kithin, you've corrupted valuable research with your human-centric theories. This ends now." His voice carried the fanatic certainty of righteous action. In the darkness, Lyra felt a rush of air as something passed close to her head. Her scales detected a rapid temperature change. Someone using thermal tracking to hunt her. She smiled slightly, remembering Marcus's words, "Let them think they have the advantage." The hunting party had expected to find a terrified scientist. Instead, they encountered someone trained by humanity's finest. Lyra moved silently through the darkness, using the thermal dampening suit Marcus had given her to confuse their sensors. Above, Marcus activated the next phase of their plan. The conference hall's environmental systems began cycling rapidly through different atmospheric compositions. Nothing dangerous, but enough to disorient anyone wearing sealed combat suits designed for specific conditions. "Impossible," one of the attackers hissed through their suit's speakers. "The override codes were perfect. Human security protocols," another growled. "The mate must have." Their realization came too late. The lights blazed back to full power, revealing Lyra standing calmly in the center of the hall. Around her, the 3 attackers stumbled, their combat suits struggling to adapt to the atmospheric changes. Officer Zexkar burst through the conference hall doors, his exoskeleton in full combat configuration. "Enough games," he roared. "Your human isn't here to." A precision stun blast caught him mid-sentence, fired from a position nobody had thought to watch. Marcus dropped from his hiding spot in the environmental control room, landing with the fluid grace of a trained operative. "Actually," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence, "I never miss my wife's presentations." The station's real security forces arrived moments later, responding to multiple authenticated alerts Marcus had arranged. They found 3 disabled attackers, 1 unconscious Braxian officer, and irrefutable evidence of a coordinated attempt to silence groundbreaking research. As security led the conspirators away, Lyra's scales rippled with concerned realization. This was too easy, she whispered to Marcus. Zexkar is too intelligent for such a crude attack. Marcus nodded grimly. You're right. This wasn't their real plan. It was a test. They wanted to see what defenses we had in place. His expression hardened, which means the real threat is still coming. The aftermath of the conference attack transformed the Chen Kithin apartment into an operations center. Holographic displays showed station security feeds while encrypted messages arrived from Marcus's old military contacts. Lyra studied the data scrolling across multiple screens, her scales shifting through analytical patterns of blue and green. The station's security chief finally agreed to investigate Zexkar's communications, she reported, sorting through incoming information. But his personal logs are encrypted with quantum-locked Braxian diplomatic codes. Marcus nodded, not looking up from his work. They won't find anything. The attack was too clean, too precise. He pulled up a 3-dimensional map of the station, but they made one crucial mistake. They underestimated human pattern recognition. The map highlighted various locations where similar accidents had occurred over the past 3 months, overlaid with staff rotation schedules, maintenance logs, and security patrol routes. A pattern emerged that only a human mind, trained in asymmetric warfare, would notice. Look here, Marcus pointed to several intersecting data points. Every incident involved different perpetrators, but they all accessed the station's systems through terminals in Section 47B, a supposedly abandoned maintenance sector. Lyra's head frills twitched with sudden understanding. The old hydroponics control room. It's listed as decommissioned, but it still has hardwired access to critical station systems. Her scales flickered with concern. Marcus, that section is classified as hazardous due to radiation leaks. Even in a protective suit, you couldn't. A slight smile crossed his face. Radiation levels that would kill most species, yes, but humans have something special. Adaptability. He pulled up his old military medical records. Remember those routine vaccinations from my service days? They included radiation resistance gene mods, standard issue for deep space operators. That's why they chose that location, Lyra realized. They assumed no one could investigate without obvious protective gear that would alert them. Exactly. Time to use their assumptions against them. Marcus activated a secure communication channel. Lieutenant Santos. That favor you owe me. I'm calling it in. Within hours, their plan took shape. Dr. Xin, Lyra's department head, agreed to publicly announce increased security measures around the research wing, measures that would be obvious and almost entirely for show. Meanwhile, Marcus's real security upgrades went into place, hidden beneath the station's routine maintenance protocols. Your protection detail starts tomorrow, Marcus told Lyra as they finished their preparations. 4 station security officers, very visible, very by the book. Lyra's scales showed skeptical purple. Won't such obvious protection alert them? That's the point. They'll be watching the guards, looking for weaknesses. Marcus brought up another display. While their attention is focused on the obvious, we'll be tracking their surveillance. Every attempt to probe our defenses will tell us more about their network. The next few days proved Marcus right. Multiple attempts to breach their security were detected, each one carefully monitored and traced. Every failed attempt revealed more about their opponent's methods and resources. They're getting frustrated, Lyra observed, studying the latest attack patterns. The attempts are becoming less careful, more aggressive. Good. Marcus added another data point to their growing network map. Frustrated people make mistakes. Look at this. He highlighted a series of communications intercepts. They're using a quantum encrypted channel, but the routing nodes are visible. Each failed attempt forces them to contact their superiors. Lyra's scales shifted to a deep gold, her species' expression of revelation. The hydroponics control room. It's not their command center. It's just a relay point. Their real base must be. Exactly. Marcus's voice carried the quiet satisfaction of a plan coming together. Every transmission passes through that room, but they originate somewhere else on the station. And thanks to their own security protocols, they have to route everything through official channels first. He overlaid the transmission data with the station's structural plans. See these power fluctuations? They're using old maintenance conduits to hide their base. But human engineering experience tells me those conduits can only handle so much quantum data traffic. You can track them through power usage patterns, Lyra realized. They never considered that because Vraxian technology uses different principles. Never underestimate human ingenuity, Marcus agreed, or our tendency to find unconventional solutions. His expression turned serious. But we need to move fast. These transmission patterns suggest they're preparing something big. How long do we have? Marcus studied the data streams. Based on the escalating activity, no more than 48 hours. Time to show them why humans have a reputation for turning the tables when backed into a corner. Marcus's prediction proved accurate sooner than expected. 36 hours into their surveillance operation, the quantum data traffic through the maintenance conduits suddenly tripled. Lyra's research terminal lit up with incoming information as their tracking programs detected multiple breaches in the station's communication network. They're not even trying to hide anymore, Lyra observed, her scales shifting to alert crimson as she processed the data. Look at these access patterns. They're breaking into every research database connected to interspecies studies. Marcus nodded grimly, his fingers flying across the holographic interface. This isn't just about us anymore. They're going after everything. Medical research, cultural exchange programs, diplomatic records. He highlighted a particularly aggressive data stream. They're trying to erase decades of progress in interspecies cooperation. But why now? Lyra's head frills vibrated with intense concentration as she analyzed the attack patterns. The security chief has Zexkar in custody. They must know we're watching. Because we're not the only ones on a deadline. Marcus pulled up the station's official schedule. Look at tomorrow's council meeting agenda. The final vote on expanding interspecies medical research funding. His expression hardened. They're not trying to stop your research. They're trying to destroy all evidence that it works. A priority alert flashed across their screens. In the medical wing, life support systems began failing in sections housing vulnerable interspecies patients. Emergency backups activated immediately. But the pattern was clear. This was no longer about subtle sabotage. Marcus, Lyra's voice carried an urgent edge as her scales pulsed with rapid temperature changes. The environmental controls in the critical care unit are showing the same signature as the conference hall attack. They're using our own tactics against us, Marcus realized, creating a crisis to divide our attention. He made a quick decision. Contact Dr. Xin. Tell her to implement Emergency Protocol 7. Lyra's scales flickered with surprise. The radiation leak warning. But that will shut down half the medical wing. Exactly. They'll think their attack succeeded. Marcus was already accessing the station's maintenance systems with the emergency codes he prepared. While they're celebrating, we'll backtrace their override commands to their source. The plan worked perfectly, for about 3 minutes. Then everything went wrong. Instead of retreating, the attackers accelerated their efforts. New systems began failing across the station. Life support, gravity controls, communication arrays, all showing signs of sophisticated cyber warfare that went far beyond standard Vraxian capabilities. This is wrong, Marcus muttered, his military training screaming warnings at him. These aren't Vraxian attack patterns anymore. This is something else. He pulled up the personnel files they'd collected. Computer, Cross-reference all station security officers who accessed Section 47B in the last month with known Vraxian diplomatic contacts. The results painted a disturbing picture. Every security officer who'd investigated their complaints had also accessed restricted diplomatic channels within hours of each report. "It's not just Zexkar," Lyra whispered, her scales pale with shock. "The entire security division is compromised." Marcus's expression turned grimmer. "Not just security. Look at these authorization codes." He highlighted several command sequences. These came from station administration. The Vraxians aren't working alone. They have allies throughout the station's power structure. A new alert caught their attention. The station's primary computer core was receiving a massive data upload from an unknown source. As they watched, encrypted files began appearing in the system, their headers marked with an ancient symbol that made Lyra's scales turn ash-gray. "The Purity Directive," she breathed. "It's not just about stopping research. They're trying to implement full species segregation across the entire station network." Her voice hardened with determination. "We have to stop them." Marcus was already moving, grabbing specialized equipment from his cache. "We will. But first, we need to get you somewhere safe. If they're really implementing the Purity Directive, every interspecies couple on this station is in danger." He checked his tactical gear with practiced efficiency. Time to show them why humans are considered the most dangerous species in the galaxy when fighting for a cause. "I'm not hiding," Lyra stated firmly, her scales showing bands of determined silver. "Whatever we do together." Marcus paused, then nodded with fierce pride. "Together, then. Let's remind them why they should have feared humans and Centaurians working as one." The station's botanical gardens had always been Lyra's favorite place. Now, as she and Marcus crouched behind the massive roots of a Centaurian crystal tree, the familiar space had become their battlefield. Above them, the garden's environmental shield flickered with unusual patterns, evidence of the Purity Directive's spreading influence through the station's systems. "Security teams are converging from 3 directions," Marcus whispered, checking his tactical display. "They're using the standard containment pattern, which means they still don't know about my military upgrades." Lyra's scales shifted through patterns of deep blue as she monitored the thermal signatures around them. "The garden's environmental controls are masking most of their heat signatures, but I can still track their movements through the vegetation." They had chosen this location carefully. The botanical garden's complex environmental systems made it difficult for standard scanners to function, and the diverse alien flora provided perfect cover. More importantly, it contained the primary access point to the station's ecological control center, their real target. "Remember the plan," Marcus said, checking his modified stun weapon. "We just need to hold their attention long enough for Lieutenant Santos to implement the bypass codes." A sudden shift in the garden's lighting made Lyra's scales ripple with warning. "They're here." The first wave of security officers moved with professional precision, their movements betraying extensive combat training. But Marcus had spent years analyzing Vraxian tactical doctrine, and he saw the flaws in their approach. "Now," he whispered. Lyra activated the device they'd prepared, sending cascading power surges through the garden's environmental systems. The artificial gravity fluctuated in precisely calculated patterns, throwing off the attackers' carefully planned formations. Marcus moved like liquid shadow, his human adaptability allowing him to compensate for the gravity changes faster than his opponents. 3 officers went down before they realized what was happening, their supposedly secure combat suits disabled by precisely targeted electromagnetic pulses. The human shows unexpected skill. A familiar voice echoed through the garden. Zexkar emerged from behind a stand of bioluminescent flowers, his exoskeleton now enhanced with prototype combat systems. But skill alone cannot overcome genetic destiny. "Funny," Marcus replied, positioning himself between the Vraxian and Lyra. "That's exactly what the last person who underestimated humans said, right before we proved them wrong." Zexkar's secondary eyes tracked additional security teams moving into position, while his primary set remained fixed on Marcus. Your species' ability to bond with genetic inferiors is a weakness we will correct. The purity directive will restore natural order. Natural order. Lyra's scales flashed with controlled anger as she worked on the garden's control console. Your own species achieved spaceflight by adapting lithoid technology. Everything about modern civilization is built on cooperation and adaptation. Temporary conveniences, Zexkar snarled. Once the directive spreads through the station's network, all such corruption will be purged. His exoskeleton hummed with charging weapons, starting with you two. The attack came from all directions at once. Security officers opened fire with stun weapons, while Zexkar launched a barrage of containment fields. But Marcus and Lyra moved in perfect synchronization, their practiced maneuvers making them seem to flow around the attacks like water. Lieutenant Santos, Marcus spoke into his encrypted communicator as he disabled 2 more officers. Status report. Bypass sequence at 70%, came the response. We need 2 more minutes. Enough games, Zexkar roared. His exoskeleton's combat systems fully activated, transforming him into a walking weapon platform. The directive will not be stopped by mere humans. Marcus smiled grimly. You still don't get it, do you? He glanced at Lyra, who nodded slightly. Humans aren't just adaptable in combat. We adapt everything, including our tactics. As if on cue, the garden's environmental shields pulsed with new energy patterns. The security team's weapons suddenly powered down, their supposedly independent power cells drained by a precisely calibrated electromagnetic pulse that Lyra had programmed using Marcus's military codes. Impossible. Zexkar stumbled as his own systems began to fail. The override codes were exactly what we wanted you to use, Marcus finished, moving in for the final confrontation. Sometimes the best human tactical doctrine isn't about winning the fight. It's about choosing the right battlefield. 3 weeks after the confrontation in the Botanical Gardens, Lyra stood before the station's governing council. Her scales shimmered with calm confidence as she presented the evidence they had gathered. The chamber's holographic displays showed detailed logs of the conspiracy, from its earliest subtle manipulations to its final desperate gambit. The purity directive wasn't just an attack on interspecies relationships, she explained, her head frills moving with emphasis. It was an attempt to reverse generations of cooperation and progress. Thanks to human ingenuity and the combined efforts of multiple species, that attempt failed. Marcus watched from the gallery, his expression neutral but his eyes alert. The security officers flanking the chamber now wore updated insignia, members of a newly formed multi-species task force, created specifically to prevent such infiltrations in the future. The investigation has revealed corruption at multiple levels, Council Speaker Tivan announced, their crystalline form reflecting the chamber's lights. Thanks to Dr. Cathin and Mr. Chen's actions, we've identified and removed 17 compromised officials. The Vraxian Empire's diplomatic status has been suspended pending further review. Lyra's scales flickered briefly to deep blue, remembering the final moments in the garden. Zexkar had fought with the desperate fury of a true believer, but he'd never understood the real power of human adaptability. It wasn't just their physical capabilities or tactical thinking. It was their ability to unite others toward a common cause. Furthermore, the speaker continued, the Council has unanimously approved expanded funding for interspecies medical research. Dr. Cathin's work will become the foundation of a new cooperative scientific initiative. In the holding cells below the Council chamber, Zexkar and his conspirators awaited transport to a neutral facility for trial. Their attempt to implement the Purity Directive had instead achieved the opposite effect, strengthening the bonds between species across the station. After the session, Marcus and Lyra walked through the station's promenade. The space felt different now. Where before some had viewed their relationship with quiet disapproval, they now received nods of respect from passing citizens of all species. The new security protocols are fully implemented, Marcus reported, his tactical mindset never fully at rest. Lieutenant Santos is overseeing training for the multi-species response teams. They're using our experience as a case study. Lyra's scales shifted to amused gold, teaching other species how to think like humans. That could be dangerous. Her tone was light, but held genuine appreciation. Your people's ability to turn defeat into victory, to adapt and overcome. It's remarkable. They stopped at their favorite observation window. The station's massive docking rings sparkled with activity as ships from dozens of worlds arrived and departed. Among them, a sleek vessel bore the markings of the newly formed Interspecies Scientific Coalition. The cooperative research program already has more applicants than expected, Lyra noted, her scales showing pleased purple patterns. 3 more human-alien couples have joined the medical research team. They're calling it the Chin Kithin Initiative. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Named after us. That might go to my head. Too late, Lyra teased, her head frills rippling with affection. Though I suppose humans have earned some pride. Your species did help save the station from disaster. Again. They watched as another ship docked, this one carrying additional security personnel trained in human tactical protocols. The station was adapting, growing stronger through diversity, just as humanity had always done. You know, Marcus said thoughtfully, Zexkar was right about one thing. Humans do change everything we touch. He took Lyra's hand, their different number of fingers interlocking naturally. We just do it by bringing people together, not pushing them apart. Lyra's scales shimmered with the deep gold of contentment. That's why the galaxy needs humans. You show us that differences can be strengths. That adaptability isn't weakness, it's the future. Above them, the station's lights shifted to evening cycle, creating a sunset effect that reflected off Lyra's scales and Marcus's tactical visor, symbols of their different natures working in harmony. They had proven that love wasn't just about overcoming differences, but celebrating them. And in doing so, they had demonstrated once again why humanity's greatest strength was not in fighting wars, but in building bridges between worlds. So, Marcus smiled, ready to show the galaxy what else humans and Centaurians can accomplish together. Lyra's scales flickered with all the colors of anticipation. With human ingenuity and Centaurian precision, the galaxy won't know what hit it. The station's eternal dance of ships and stars continued around them, a testament to the endless possibilities when species chose cooperation over conflict. And at the heart of it all, a human and his alien wife stood together, living proof that the best adaptations come not from force, but from love.